All right.
Awesome.
So you guys can see me better. Hi.
Right, so we're getting ready to start. I see people in the chat saying hello, what's up?
Hello.
Everyone. All right, so just to let everybody know, this meeting is being recorded, so we can put it up online later on for people to, watch those people who can't make it, because, traditionally, Melissa, on a Saturday, people are usually either shopping for groceries or,
Of
making
course.
their Saturday soup or whatever the case.
Yeah.
All right, so let me see. I have about 8 people in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can start with that. People join as they come along. So let me start off by just letting everybody know, welcome to another Jamaica Animation Nation Network meeting. For those of you who don't know, JANN is the Animation Association, which is a community of animation practitioners and stakeholders. And as a community, we're basically just all trying to, network and find solutions to our everyday challenges as an industry. So we always striving to promote each other's work. We're always striving to communicate with the government and influence, policy, as well as interacting with studios, helping them to find animators, like yourselves who are freelancers or just coming out of school looking for work. And of course, helping the training institutions with, any educational queries that they have. Uh, Today we have a special guest. Her name is Melissa Lyn, and let me give you a proper introduction. So, Melissa is an animator currently working in Ottawa, Canada for Mercury Filmworks. She was born in Kingston, Jamaica, so she is Jamaican, guys. Her family moved up to Canada when she was young, and she spent her childhood growing up in the Greater Toronto area. She has worked on shows like Hilda, the Guard, Tangled, all of which are some of my favorites, and now a new show slated to air sometime in the future on Netflix. With now over 6 years of experience, Melissa strives to continue to grow in her craft while teaching new animators and creating content that inspires an emotional connection from viewers of varying ages. So that is Melissa in a nutshell. And she's going to be talking to us today about a bit about her journey in to this animation world, and she's going to show us some of the stuff she worked on, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A. I have some questions for her, but if you guys have questions first, I will always break my questions to jump to what you have to ask. All right, Melissa, you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So, uh, I see some questions already coming through the chat, and I would love to answer them. So just to address them really quickly, and then I'm gonna start a screen share and show you guys some clips from the shows that I've worked on in the past and things like that. So I see a question related to Frederick. I don't think so. And then I do know Greg and Corey, yes. So there was a group that came down to Mercury the year that I started, and we were all in the same training group. So yes, I do remember them. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Really excited to share some stuff with you guys, talk about the industry, what it's like working in animation and stuff. And first, I think I'm gonna start with a screen share. So I wanted to show you guys the Mercury Filmworks website to just in case not everybody knows what Hilda is, what Lion Guard is, and stuff like that, to give some context. So I'm on the Mercury website right now, and it's just scrolling through some of the shows that we have worked on most recently. And if you see me turning my head, it's because I have a second monitor over here. So The Lion Guard is a show that I worked on for the first 5-ish years of working at Mercury. And then from there, I did a little bit of work on Tangled. I did a little bit of work on Hilda season 1, a little bit on Give a Mouse a Cookie. So sometimes within a studio, we tend to jump around on different projects and things like that. And most recently, I was on the second season of Hilda. So the second season is supposed to air on Netflix sometime in the fall. And then I'm working on a new show. We don't know what the release date yet is for that one. And it hasn't been announced yet. So because of our contracts and things like that, we can't actually talk about what the show is, what it's about, what the name is even, until our clients release that information. So it will be a surprise. Maybe you'll see me again next year, early next year, and I'll be like, this is the show I was working on. Hope you guys like it. But yeah, so this is just scrolling through showing some images from those shows that we've worked on, and then I've picked out some YouTube clips from that got like a little bit of my animation in it. So we'll check those out too. Not so much the Hilda one, but I'll explain once we get there. So I'm going to show the opening for Lion Guard Season 3. I did do some animation in this one. So, in case you guys don't know, The Lion Guard is a 3-season show, and it's a spin-off of The Lion King. So, I'll be talking a lot about The Lion King very soon. But the next clip I wanted to show is from a show that I haven't mentioned yet, actually. I did briefly work on a preschool show that we had called Canticos. It's very, very cute. And I did some animation in this clip as well, so play that too. I'm not sure if you guys have any audio, because I have the audio right now coming out of my headphones, but we'll kind of stick with that for now, just to show you guys what it looks like. The audio is not too exciting. Okay, I see what you guys are saying. So I will post the links to these clips on the chat as well. But yeah, it's more just to show you like visually what I'm talking about. So it'll just be like, oh yeah, I worked on Canticos, and then you don't have any visual reference for that. Okay, so that is one of the preschool shows that I worked on most recently, and then I'm just going to show the introduction to Hilda. Now, I didn't do any of the animation in this intro, but of course, season 2 isn't out yet, so I can't show you anything yet from there. And then I'll post these links in the chat as well so that you can check them out afterwards. And yeah, okay, so I will post all those links now. So once it is a convenient time, you can all enjoy and be able to actually hear it too. I think I'll continue on just kind of giving you all some backstory as to how I got into the industry, what even like prompted me to study animation and those kind of things as well. Just kind of talk about it, you know, and environment kind of things. So, uh, as was mentioned earlier, I did move to Canada when I was really small, and I think that like right out of the gate, like I was always really interested in animation, and I would watch a lot of TV and cartoons, and a lot of Disney movies. So when The Lion King came out, I remember. Well, I don't actually remember because I was too young, but I watched the movie in theaters, and once we had it on VHS, I watched that movie every day, like every day on repeat, to the point where I could actually memorize like the lines, and I would just be reciting it as the movie was going. Like Lion King was my favorite thing. It came out around the time when I was like maybe in kindergarten, so I was very young, and I remember in school, teachers would always say, "Oh, you know, what would you like to be when you grow up?" And kids would be like, "Oh, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be this and that." And I was like, "I want to animate. I want to draw. I want to do Lion King." So for me, like I was always very, very bent on like doing animation no matter what. Um, so I'm just getting the last link here because I closed the line guard tab earlier. There we go. So yeah, so I was pretty set on doing animation from the beginning. But I was never like, even though I really liked drawing, I was never really great at drawing. I was better at a lot of other things. And so it was really challenging for me because, you know, it felt like friends and family and things like that are like, "Oh, you're so good at these other things. Like, why do you want to do art? Like, what are you gonna do with that? Like, are you gonna be a starving artist? Like, what do artists even do though? Do they get paid enough money? Like, all that kind of stuff." And I just knew, like, you know, deep within, like, animation was what I wanted to do, and I was gonna do it regardless of how much it paid or anything like that, or even if I was like really good at it or not. Like, I was like, no, I'm going to do this. So I was very, very, very determined from a young age, and I don't think that's a very typical thing. But I did want to touch on the struggles that I had getting into the animation industry. It wasn't so much the industry part, but more getting into animation school. So like I was saying before, like I was okay at drawing, but I wasn't like, you know, I'm sure a lot of you can relate. You're in school and there's always that one kid that's like really, really amazing at art. That was never me. There was always somebody that was a lot better at drawing than I was. And not to say that it's a competition because it's not, but like I was never recognized as like that kid that always draws. I was one of the kids that was always drawing, but not one of the strongest artists. So I went through high school and I took a lot of art courses and computer related courses, thinking it would be helpful for me to you know, learn basic computer things and things like that to help with animation. And luckily there was an animation and TV and film section within some of the programs that I did take in, or some of the classes that I took in high school. But for art class, like I took it, but I had to work very hard to keep up with the rest of the class, a lot of the other students that were a lot better at painting and drawing than I was. So it was many, many years of study and many, many days of practicing, watching my favorite anime, playing my favorite video games, drawing characters from that, drawing my own like OCs and fan art and like all that stuff, and looking up anime tutorials and going on DeviantArt and looking at what people do. Just like, you know, spending a lot of time absorbing art, practicing, studying, reading. So I think because, like, you know, I didn't feel like I was as strong at not animation specifically, but because I felt like I wasn't so strong at art, I did a lot of studying and reading and things like that to where I understood a lot of the theory. So then it was just like, okay, how do I get like my hands to do the thing? So after I graduated from high school, I went to Sheridan College, which is a school in Oakville, Ontario, in Canada. And I went into their art fundamentals program, and basically it's a program that like uh, helps you build up your portfolio skills and like your general art skills, but it's not animation focused or illustration focused or any particular like specific art path. It's very like general and kind of is more geared towards building like artists that can have like their own gallery shows and things like that. So I went from the art fundamentals course into the visual and creatives arts course. But I wasn't there because I wanted to take the course for the entire 3 years. I was there because I was trying to get a good enough portfolio to get into the animation program. Yes, I did say Sheridan. So Sheridan College is a really great animation program. It usually turns out wonderful animators every year, but it is notoriously hard to get into. So I applied like at least 3 times. I say at least three because like I did technically apply when I was getting out of high school, but I knew I wasn't gonna get in, so I didn't really make a portfolio. Um, but yeah, so it took me a very long time to get into the animation program. But I did graduate from the other program first, so I had 3 years of experience just practicing up my art skills, and then I went through the 4-year program at Sheridan. So that's 7 years of art study outside of high school. So I'm telling you guys this to kind of give you context as to like how hard I had to work just to be like up to par with a lot of my other classmates and things. And I'm still here. So once I graduated from the Sheridan program, what they actually do for students, and a lot of other art colleges will do this as well, is they'll actually invite the industry to come to the school and watch student films, and then from there students can have interviews. So I was very lucky in that Mercury actually asked or set up an interview for me and then asked me if I wanted to work for them and move out to Ottawa. And here I am. So, yeah, so just to kind of sum all of that up, I just wanted to touch on that it was a very, very difficult journey getting to be into the animation industry. I worked very, very hard. And I would love to encourage anyone. I think everybody that's here today is already has studied animation or already has an interest. But if there's anybody here or anybody watching the recording that is considering animation and maybe just doesn't feel like their skills are up to par yet, if you're really passionate about it, just keep going at it. Keep practicing, keep learning, keep expanding your skills, keep studying, and keep watching things. You wouldn't know like how much even just like watching animated content on YouTube or Netflix or whatever platform that you're using can actually like filter through and fill in sort of like your own mental library of techniques and styles and things that you can try. And just don't give up. If it's something that you really want to do, it can be a very fulfilling career. Um, it's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's wanting to try. So, yeah, cool. So that's just a little bit about me. I think I'll just talk a little bit to what it's like in the industry. And then I'll open up the floor to questions. I will answer all of your questions to the best of my ability. Obviously, I'm just going to disclaimer out of the gate. I can't talk about projects that I'm working on currently in any detail due to having to sign non-disclosure agreements. So typically what you'll find in the animation industry, especially as an animator, because of the way the pipeline goes, anything that you're working on, usually nobody will see it until like a year later, maybe a few months later. Sometimes you'll be lucky that the show will be airing as your studio's working on it. But usually we will animate the entire season and then people will see it after. So yeah. So no answers about any current projects. I'll be keeping it very general, but I can talk about projects that have already aired and that people have seen. So I do want to kind of talk about maybe first what the pipeline is like. I'm sure a lot of you already know what it is, but I'll just go through it really briefly. So basically within an animation studio that is more service based, as opposed to if you're in a studio that's working on an IP project. So that's a project that the studios actually come up with. If you're doing service work, a lot of the times, all of the pre-production stuff, so storyboards, design for characters, layouts, backgrounds, sometimes background painting as well. All of that stuff will be sent to the studio. If not the backgrounds, actually, maybe just like background keys or location designs will be sent to the studio, and then from there the studio will have its respective departments working on each stage of the animation as it goes from pre-production through production and then to post-production. So what we do is we'll get the boards, we'll have character designers design characters, design props. If there's any additional things that the clients haven't sent to the studio, we will supplement that stuff, or the client will send it. It depends on what studio you're working at. And then from there, from the location designs that are provided to us, we'll have background artists draw the backgrounds based on the storyboards that are given. People will paint those backgrounds. Then we have an entire crew of people that will set up scenes for us in Harmony. So actually, on a quick side note, Toon Boom Harmony is I believe, the most popular program that is used across the industry. It's pretty much the standard at this point now, but there are still studios using other programs for 2D animation. So there's a whole department of people that will actually set up the scenes with the backgrounds, the storyboards, or the Leica reels with the audio in it, the character rigs that you need, and any other things that you will need to create the scene that you have to work on. Then from there, it goes on to the animation crew. So from there, animation supervisors like myself, I'm currently supervising, will hand out scenes to animators. Animators will animate them. They will then go through the approval system, be checked by the director. Then the director will send it to the client. If the client has notes, they will send the notes to us. We will apply any notes that need to be applied, send it back to the client, and then they do their post-production stuff. Between that, actually, we also do editing and audio stuff and things like that, and comp and effects and all of those things too. So when I say animation, I was actually including effects animation, compositing, and like sound and everything within that. And then it gets into the client again. And then once it's all good, then it goes on to whatever broadcasting company or platform or whatever we're using. So these days there's a lot of online streaming stuff. So we have been seeing a lot more on Netflix and YouTube and things like that. Since working at Mercury, I've been working on mostly shows for Disney and for Netflix. Canticos was a Nick Jr. show, but it was on YouTube. And prior to actually starting working at Mercury, I worked at another smaller studio named Little Black Stone, and that is a studio in Toronto. And we were doing some service work for Mondo Media, which is a YouTube channel, and doing some really fun, more grown-up types of animation in Flash at that point in time. So anyway, that's sort of what my day-to-day is like in a nutshell, in terms of like the pipeline. I won't go into too much specifics. As an animation supervisor, I not only check scenes and assign scenes and things like that, but part of my job is actually to mentor animators too. So I would love to open up the floor right now to any questions that you guys might have, because I think that like in order for everyone to get like the most out of this panel that I'm doing with you is for you to ask me stuff. Ask me all the stuff that you want to know, and I will tell you as best as I can, and give some tips and tricks if I can as well. And part of what I love to do and what I do in my day-to-day anyway is mentor people and talk about animation and staying healthy and not overworking, because we all love this so much. We won't stop and keep going until we're super tired and then not able to output as much stuff. So yeah. So if anyone has questions, please ask them. Until then, I'll just keep rambling. And
Well,
yes,
I'm
hello,
jumping in
Greg.
to join.
Yes, of course.
Yes. Yes, when I told Greg you were on, he hurried up and jumped on. So yeah, so I don't see the questions at the moment, but while people are thinking of their questions, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was in terms of like, joining a studio, how how ready do you have to be to join a studio? Like one of the things that a lot of the studios here always say is that, boy, the graduates from the animation programs, they aren't production ready yet. In your experience, are animation students, once they've graduated, are they production ready, or does that take place in the studio itself?
All right, are you guys ready? I'm going to tell you all the truth right now. So, when students come fresh out of school, we typically don't expect everyone to be production ready, because the way that schools are, and it's not a fault of a school or anything like that, just the way that it is, right? You're in school to learn the principles, to learn the pipeline, how to do like basic stuff. You're not actually typically doing production work. And yes, you have assignments. Yes, they can be structured in a way that mimics a production, but it's not the same as working on a production that has deadlines. Yes, assignments have deadlines, but it's completely different. So it depends on the studio that you work in. Not every studio is equipped to give a ton of training to new animators. So that's why when you apply to a job, it's important to check to see how much experience they're looking for. But that's also why some studios will want people to be more experienced when they start versus some other studios might be a bit more lenient. It depends on the resources they have available to them. So no matter what, like students are never, ever, 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 ever going to be production ready when they come out of school. It's just not, it's like going to driver's school and like being expected to know how to drive before you even been in a car. Yes, you know all the things you're supposed to do. You know what the signs mean on the road. You know where the pedals are and things like that. But you need to actually do it to understand what it's like. And the thing about school as well is that you have homework and stuff, right? You don't have homework when you're working in a studio. You just have your 8-hour day or however long it is, and then you go home, hopefully on time. And that's pretty much it. So just to touch on the training aspect, some studios do have training programs if they have the resources available. So where I work, we do have a training program right now. It varies in timing, but we usually teach the same things. And then as a supervisor for me, I'm actually mentoring some brand new animators right now that are fresh out of school, and they come in with varying skill sets, different strengths and weaknesses, and I kind of have to, bring everyone together and be like, okay, let's focus on your strengths. Let's take note of your weaknesses and kind of chip away at those, but everybody's going to get up to production speed at a different rate. So,
Melissa,
yeah.
oh, sorry to interrupt, but
Oh, great.
Doyen Williams, he's asking a question, and Doyen Williams is one of the biggest, supporters of the animation industry. He's been here from the beginning, fighting at all different
Mhm.
levels, and he's asking a very interesting question. He's saying, "Can we use this clip in talks with other organizations?" And I believe what he means by that is
Mhm.
a lot of times when we're talking to organizations, we're getting this whole, oh, students need to be studio ready and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to convince them from our perspective, not having experience in a studio, but hearing it from somebody like you who's not only been a student, but now you're an animation supervisor, working in one of the biggest studios in Canada. Hearing it from you would carry a different weight. So he wants to know, He's also, yeah, he wants to know, can we use this video clip in talks with organizations?
Yes, absolutely. Please. And if you need more people to say so, I will get them. No, I'll say the same thing. And of course, I do want to say, and make it really clear that I'm coming from an animation standpoint. So when it comes to backgrounds, character design, sound, setup, that kind of stuff is different. It's not to say that if you are a student and you wanted to be a compositor, that you would be expected to be production ready for compositing. There is still an aspect of training, but everything that I'm going to talk about today is revolving around animation specifically, because that's what my specialty is.
Right. Dorian has another question. It's a technical question. He says,
Mm-hmm.
I know character design is led by the target audience. Is the animation style also led by the target? This target, where animation style means using ones, twos, blending, smudging, camera use, etc.
That's a really good question. I think it depends on who the showrunner is, who the broadcaster is, who the client is, all that sort of stuff. So I can say, for example, a show like Hilda, because that is a show that is done at Mercury. It's not our IP, but we work really closely with Luke Pearson and Silvergate to do the animation for that. Hilda is based off of a comic book series by Luke Pearson. So if you have ever seen the Hilda comics before, you'll see that from each book, the style of the way that the characters are drawn and everything changes. And then we have the show that we ultimately came up with on Netflix with the designs and everything. So I wasn't involved as much in the first season, but I would say that like the the way that the character designs were decided upon was very much based on the director's choice, and what he felt would work the best and communicate the message the best. So I don't know necessarily if it was about the target audience in that case. It was kind of more about how do we design this character so that it communicates what we want to communicate, but also is really great to animate with. And then when it came to the style of the show, it also was that as well. It was more based on how do we communicate or get this message across. And the thing about Hilda, the reason why I bring it up is because it is a show that uses ones, twos, threes, and fours. It doesn't use ones as much, but sometimes we have to. And the reason for that is because Hilda is a show that has characters of varying sizes. So we have the human characters, we have the tiny, tiny little elf characters, and then we have the big, big giants and stuff like that. So in order to communicate the scale difference between those characters, it made sense to animate them in different ways. So I think that it depends on the show again. But just because Hilda is a show that I got to work on for the second season and I had to sort of learn all that stuff, based on that, my experience from there, it's kind of more based in like, what is the best way to communicate what we want to communicate? And that's sort of where I get really nerdy and start going deep into like animation techniques, and if you do this it will have this effect, and if you do that it will have that effect, but it's all done with intention. And if we do want to phrase it in another way, we could say it's more done in a way that makes it so that the audience will understand it the best, or that the message will be taken the easiest. So I hope that answers your question.
I hope it does too. So Ned has a question, and I have another question.
Mhm.
Next question is, what was the pipeline applications that you guys use, post and pre-production? And I'm assuming he's asking whether it's a commercial product like Toon Boom, which you had mentioned earlier, or if there's a
Mhm.
proprietary. I'm thinking that most likely a company as big as Mercury probably uses Toon Boom, but has proprietary, you know, um, plugins or mechanisms. But you can tell us more. And he was also saying, and is all the finished animation done in-house or outsourced afterwards and keyframing? So
Okay.
two-part question: what application you use in the post and pre-production pipeline, and is the animation done in-house or outsourced?
Okay, that's a good question. So, in terms of the applications, again, it depends on the studio, and what their budget's for, who they might even be partnered with, and stuff like that. Currently at Mercury, we use a lot of the Toon Boom software. For 3D, I think we use Maya. I'm not in the 3D department, so I don't actually really know. But I'm pretty sure it's Maya. For storyboarding, I'm not sure what software we use either, but in the past I've used like Storyboard Pro and things like that. For like design work, we tend to use Photoshop. So mostly like industry standard type things. When I was working in other studios, I was using Flash before it became Animate, to do my animation work in and my effects work in. And I was using Photoshop to do layouts and design work in. So a lot of the same kind of overlapping things. That's not to say though that those programs are the best ones to use. I think Harmony for animation is excellent, and is maybe the best for 2D animation. But when it comes to like for interface and stuff, but when it comes to like design work and things like that, Photoshop is great, but I think programs like Clip Studio Paint, Paint Tool Sci, even like Sketchbook, what else is there? Procreate, like programs like that work really well for design as well. It just depends on what the studio is using, so they'll want to keep things more uniform. And because of the industry standard, it just makes it easier if it's a production that's being done between studios. It's just easier if everybody uses the same thing, or at least a program that can open up files with the same file extension. So something that can open up PSDs, something that can open up Harmony files. I don't know what the extension is for that, but something that can open up PDFs, because it's not just the visual stuff. We also have people that keep stuff organized. So we use Adobe Acrobat for PDFs, Microsoft Excel, Word, like all those things too. So that's sort of what the applications that we use tend to be, or the major programs, or not major programs, major companies that have like those umbrellas of products that they provide, like Photoshop, Flash, etc., Audition even, to do production work in. And then for the second half of the question, if finished animation is done in-house or outsourced, it depends on the project. So typically for animation that comes from the US, all the pre-production stuff is done in the US, and then they will outsource their animation, and then whatever studio gets the animation project, they will send it back to the US, and then they'll check it out, give their notes and things like that, and send it back, and so on and so forth. So at Mercury, we are not outsourcing usually. We are being outsourced to. We do outsource things sometimes, and we do partner up with studios sometimes as well. But again, it depends on the project. I think that if you aspire to work in the US, it's mostly pre-production work. I don't typically see a lot of production work there. Have seen some in New York, but like in very, very small project scales, it's mostly pre-production stuff there. And Canada gets a lot of the actual production work. I think that was it.
Great. All right. So my question is, like, I've watched Hilda, I've watched Lion Guard. Well, I still watch Lion Guard a lot because I have a 2-year-old and he loves Lion Guard. And I've seen Tangled. And one of the questions I've always wanted to know, like, I can see it in Tangled and Lion Guard, not so much in Hilda, but I want to know which, or not which, how much rigging versus frame by frame hand drawn is done in each of these animations.
So good question. So I know my friends at Mercury, they'll be like, Melissa, don't tell them everything. Don't worry, I won't. But we actually do primarily use rigs. So we don't actually do any frame-by-frame animation other than with effects. The effects, I
Even
think, are
Hilda?
done frame-by-frame. Yes, it's all rigged animation.
Wow. Hilda
Yeah.
was the one that I couldn't tell. Like with Lion Guard, I was like, okay, I see some stuff that's indicating that there's rigged.
Mhm.
With Tangled, definitely. Like I really love Tangled because I know it's rigged, and I just love it.
Mhm.
It looks really beautiful. Like literally, when I saw Tangled, I thought this is how I would love my animations, my rigged animations to look. But Hilda,
Mhm.
now I was like, is this hand drawn or is this rigged? I can't tell.
It's all
So
rigged. The whole thing. Everything is rigged. I don't know that the way that production is in Canada anyway lends itself very well to it being hand drawn. That's not to say it can't be done, but at least at Mercury and other studios I worked at, everything is rigged. Um, but they're rigged so beautifully, and that's why we're able to get the product that we do get. We really push that everybody applies the 12 principles to their animation as well, and we try to make sure that when people are rotating things and turning things, that it actually feels like they're turning it in 3D space, but we're using rigs to do that and moving the parts around to do that. On Hilda, I will say it's not really a trade secret, but on Hilda we do encourage that people sketch out their ideas first, and I think that might be why it has more of that hand-drawn quality to it. But it's all rigs.
wow. Really, you need to teach us all that stuff. Just tell Mercury the reason you're doing it is because you're making sure that you have an outsourcing spot when you guys
Yeah,
need some more
exactly.
people, right? Yeah. All right, let me not hog all the questions. Dale Bedesi, he's
Mhm.
asking, do you find yourself working at all points of the pipeline?
For me, no. So the reason why is because I am in a really big studio right now. So Mercury currently has like over 250 employees. So it's very important for everybody to really play their part within the pipeline. Not because nobody can like, expand and do other things, but there's just so much. It's like, okay, everybody focus on your thing, and then, it kind of goes down the line. So if everyone's doing their thing, then the project will get done on time or will get done well. In a smaller studio setting, however, I was dabbling more in different pipeline positions. So I was doing layouts and character designs and character rigging and animation and effects animation. But it was a smaller project and a smaller team. So again, it depends. If you're in a bigger studio, you most likely will be just focusing on that one role. And that's why, today when I'm talking about industry experience, it's mostly animation because I've only been doing animation for the last 6 years since coming out here in Ottawa.
Right. Joel McFarlane has a question. Says it sounds like Mercury produces mainly 2D cutout animation. Does your team also do frame by frame animation like with TV Paint? And how different is it from a Toon Boom pipeline?
Right. So as far as I know, we mostly just animate in Harmony. We don't use any other programs to animate in. Other than when we need like CG elements, then we'll have like our 3D team do some stuff. That's not to say that couldn't change down the line, and that's not to say other studios don't do that. That's just what Mercury is. We mostly just work in Harmony, and our entire pipeline revolves around it.
Okay. Asher Brown has a question. She says, how does one get in on the training program mentioned earlier? I don't recall which training program she's talking
Okay, yeah,
about.
I
Okay.
remember. So
Okay.
the training that I was in was, I think, blended with when Greg and Corey and everyone else. I didn't get to meet everybody, but
Oh, yes.
when everybody else, I think that was a special case where they were able to come down. And just the fact that it was able to happen, I'm sure we could probably do something like that again in the future. I don't have the power to make that decision. I'm just guessing. So if you email Mercury and you're like, hey, put me in this training program, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, please don't come after me. Like, um, because that was a special thing. But for me, it was a training group for the new hire. So it wasn't quite the same thing that we were doing. We were just working together, since we were getting training, they were getting training. Might as well blend the
Yeah,
groups together. Yeah.
right. To be honest,
So yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, I believe that that training program was something that was negotiated between a studio out here called GSW and Mercury through
Mhm.
through some liaison. I don't remember the name of the consultant. Maybe it was Joan Vogelsang or something. But I think that
Mhm.
that was a one-off thing where it was just kind of like a uh, what's the word? I wouldn't say friendly exchange, but
Yeah, I
people
know
at the
what you
top
mean
know people
though.
at the top, and yeah,
Exactly. It's sort of like you got connections and you kind of got it to work. But typically in a studio, it depends on the studio whether or not they have training programs. So once you apply, if they have training, they will give training, but it's not training in the sense of, hey, do you want to learn animation? Come learn with us, and then
right,
goodbye. Because like the thing about working in a studio as well is that every studio has its own way of working. So me with all my years of experience, I can go to another studio in Toronto and I have to start learning from scratch. It's not like I have to learn my techniques all over again, but I have to learn how that studio works, and what kind of styles they have. And so they might have training for me in that case, or they might reserve the training for people that are coming fresh out of school. But again, it just depends on like what resources the studio has available. When I was in a smaller studio, I didn't get no training. It was more like, hey, just do the thing. And then when I wasn't doing it very good, the director would call me into the office and be like, okay, cool, let me show you how to do it. And I was like, oh, now I get it. But it wasn't like training. It was like, you know, within the production schedule and the hours that we had to deliver stuff. So it was kind of stressful, but it turned
right,
out
right,
good.
right. All right. So Asher Brown was saying that I meant as if whether you had to apply for a job or do you have to just apply, not you specifically, because you mentioned that the studio has them. Not sure what she's saying there. I guess maybe what she's asking is how do you get a job in a studio? Is it something that you just apply straight to the job, or are
Mm,
there other methods? Is it that you have to go through any particular I guess programs, or you
right.
know
Okay. I
is it
understand.
just simply submitting your portfolio, or is there something else that has to be done to get a job in a studio?
Right, right. So yeah, there are multiple ways of doing it, but they all kind of fall within the same umbrella, which is, you would apply when there's a job opening and submit your portfolio, and then give an interview. But there are also job fairs, or like I was mentioning before, sometimes they'll go to schools and watch student films.
Right.
Sometimes you can network if you go to animation festivals or film festivals and things like that too. But it will also be, within that you apply to the job, and then hopefully you get accepted.
Joel McFarlane is asking, what's the biggest misconception newcomers have about animation?
Oh, I'm not sure if that's newcomers, like newcomers to the animation industry, like new or fresh grads, or newcomers like just people that want to get into animation.
All right.
But I can touch on both
Yeah, touch
if
on both.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for newcomers, in the sense of someone that is just getting into animation and wants to, start drawing, I think the first misconception is that animation, since it's done on the computer now, that it's easier.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not.
It's
It's
easier, but it's still hard. Like
exactly,
it's still
exactly.
hard.
So when I went to school, actually, there was still a heavy, heavy lean on us learning how to animate on paper. So I actually learned how to animate on paper. We had a huge stack of like, this much for like, okay, maybe not that much, maybe like this much. for like 3 seconds of animation. We take our animation paper to the computer lab, and then we put our peg bar down, and you take the animation sheet and you put it down, and then you take a picture with the webcam, and you take the next page and you put it down, and so in that sense, computers are taking like the physical pieces of paper away and not knowing what your animation looks like until you shoot it. But the principles are all the same. The drawing skills that you need are all the same. It's if you're doing digital animation where you're like hand drawing it, but on the computer, you still have to do roughs, you still have to do cleanup, you still have to do paint, and all that stuff. It just takes the paper part away from it. The other common misconception is that like it's not so much a misconception as just like a not full understanding or get real close. You guys all know if you're animating 24 frames per second, there's 24 drawings every second. 24! And people like every time I tell them, they're like, wait, so you mean 24 pieces of paper or 24 separate drawings? And I'm like, yeah, it's 24 every second. And then you go to the movies and you watch these like 2-hour movies. It's like, yeah, every second it's 24 drawings now. With the computer, you don't actually have to draw every single one. You can use the computer to help fill in the in-betweens. Just like how back in the day, with more senior animators, they would have in-betweeners. So they would do all the key animation stuff and they would go in and fill in the blanks. So the computers kind of become the in-betweener these days, but you still have to check the in-betweens because computer's too perfect in the sense that it's not perfect because it doesn't look good. So I would say those are two things for people that want to get into animation but aren't quite understanding what the scope is. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of drawing. So you should definitely practice drawing in a quick manner. Use a quick format or shorthand to draw stuff. Now for misconceptions for newcomers coming into animation that have studied animation, there's a lot of things I could talk about, I think. I think one of the things is that it will be easy, like I said before, because like school kind of sets a precedent, but its school setting is not like industry setting, so it's very difficult. It's still like an office job, so there's that as well. It's not like that sort of, that like hippie, like no free, all I'm doing is drawing all day and it's so cool and I can just sit and like enjoy. And it's still, you have your deadlines, you have the things that are assigned to you, you have to get them by a certain day and you have to hand them in by a certain day. They have to be approved by people. You still have to go into work on time. You still have to meet a certain quota every week and that sort of thing. So I think that, a lot of people go into art thinking like, yeah, it's because it's not a desk job. It is though. But it's a really fun one and it's definitely fulfilling. And I think one of my favorite parts personally of working, which I don't know if everyone can relate to, but one of the best parts is when you work on a show and it's done and it finally airs and people watch it and they enjoy it, or they see your scene and they laugh because they're supposed to laugh, or they cry because they're supposed to cry. It is the best feeling. And you can get that in school, but it's not the same. Once you're animating in the industry, people all over the world will watch what you're doing, and to get that reaction from so many people is the best thing.
Okay, so let me ask you another question now. You're currently an animation supervisor, right?
Yep.
So there are two things that I want to know. One's related to the previous question, and one's related to the question I have. One, what does it take to get to animation supervisor position?
Mm-hmm.
And two, this is the one related to the previous question. Do you find that you have like graduates coming in with varying expectations? Meaning, do you find you have some graduates coming in and like totally scared, like, oh my God, like I'm in this big studio, I hope I don't mess up, and they're like very timid? And do you find the student who's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna show these guys what I'm all about, and then when it really hits them how rough it's going to be, their ego just gets cut down, like, Have you seen those two? And how does that usually work out?
Oh
Who does
my gosh.
better?
Absolutely, I've seen all of it, everything that you guys can imagine. Okay, no, not everything, because I get surprised every time something new comes along. But yes, so I think I'll talk about the sort of coming in scared sort of thing versus the coming in confident thing first. So it's very common these days for new hires, people who've never worked in the industry before, to come in a studio and be petrified of being fired. Um, I when I got hired, I actually didn't know how to animate in Harmony at all. I only had experience in Flash, and I made that known. I was very honest about it. I was like, look, okay, I would love to work for y'all, but like I've only animated in Flash, so if you could teach me some Harmony, but I pick up things fast and I'll get it because I'm very technically like comfortable with technical stuff and things like that and whatever. And then I got to Mercury and I saw what we were actually doing in Harmony, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna find out like I don't even know how to make a drawing. I thought I did, but then they just showed me how to do it, and I'm like, what is the network? What is this? I've never seen this before. Pegs? What do you mean? What? Like, and so I was very very afraid, and I mean I'm still here, so we can skip the whole story. I was okay, but like, um, for the people that I'm working with now, they're just as afraid and they know so much more than I did when I started, and I just want to like, because we're all working from home now, I would never actually like physically touch somebody because that's unprofessional, but I want to
Right.
like grab their shoulders and shake them like, you'll be okay. I didn't know what I was doing. You at least know how to draw in the program. You'll be fine. But I think part of the reason why that happens is because of just the way that disconnect between school and industry is, and a lot of the instructors, might not be the case in Jamaica right now, but it is the case here in a lot of the schools in Canada and the US. A lot of the teachers have been working in the industry a long time, and the industry has changed a lot over the last few years. We're much more accommodating to people with special needs, much more accommodating to people with mental health issues and things like that,
That's good.
because we all have it too. But not just because of that though. Like we're a lot more accommodating to people.
Right.
And that's not to say that they weren't in the past, but because there's so many projects coming around, um, people like studios need people to fill in the role so they can get all this work done. There was
Hmm.
a time period, I think around 2008, 2009, when like there wasn't that much animation happening in the Greater Toronto area, and I think maybe even Canada in general. So it was very hard for people to find jobs, and I think it also stemmed from that as well, because it's like, oh yeah, well, not too long ago, people graduated from animation, they're applying everywhere, and nowhere was hiring. But it's different now with, I think, places like Netflix and all of the new streaming services and how big YouTube is. And, we have things like TikTok now. I haven't seen any animation on TikTok, but like, I wouldn't be
Getting there.
surprised if it pops up. Yeah.
It's going to.
Just,
It's going to.
like people are finding ways to just like do things and do their projects and just make things, and it's much easier because of the computers that we have. So because of that, I think there's still the lingering of, oh, am I going to get a job if I get out of school? And then when you get the job, like, oh, am I going to be able to keep it because it's so competitive, and somebody else might be better than me and they're going to fire me because I'm not as good. And I'm like, I can't give you any promises, but like you'll probably be fine and it's okay. And as long as you communicate, you show up on time, you do your work, and you study up if you need to study up, then the person coming in that's really nervous will
Yeah.
eventually be okay. Now, the
And what
person
about the
coming in,
arrogant person? Yeah.
yeah, the person coming in arrogant, they might be great, but if no one likes to work with them, nobody wants to work with them. And
Yeah.
it doesn't always mean that they'll be let go or anything like that, but it's just like you have to, again, like animation is an art, but it's also an office job, and you have to be able to work with other people. So if you can't work with people, you won't last very long because you're not doing all of it. But if okay, I'm sure everybody here today is lovely and nice and wonderful to work with. So I'm not saying this to anyone specifically, but if someone is watching this and they're very arrogant and they don't like to work with people, you can still be an animator. You can still make animation. You just have to do your own film. By yourself. Which is I laugh, but it's actually like something that you can do too. You can always make your own short films where you're your own boss, submit it to festivals. You can make your own projects and sell it to networks and stuff. You can make your own pitches and things like that. But once you're in a studio setting, you have to be able to work with people. So if you're arrogant but you can work with people, fine. But if you're arrogant and nobody likes to work with you, I don't know. Might be a bit tougher. And then as for what it takes to become an animation supervisor, I think that a lot of it is just experience. So of course, being a good drafts person, being good at animation, but also understanding like the point of animation, having a basic knowledge of cinematography, not just from an animation standpoint, but like in general from film, why we use certain shots, what the emotion is supposed to be for the scene, what we're trying to communicate in the scene is very important. Because as animators, you get your like a reel, you get your storyboard or whatever, and you can just follow what's in the board and be like, they gave me this, I give you this, now it's moving. And some productions actually want that, and they'll give you storyboards that are almost animated because they want the clients to follow exactly what's in the board. But what makes the difference between that kind of animator and someone that could be a supervisor or a director is being able to look at what's given to them and analyze it and understand what the message was supposed to be and add to it. So I think that if anyone wants to aspire to be an animation supervisor, definitely brush up on your animation skills and your cinematography skills, also your leadership skills, because it's a leadership position. And management skills as well, because you'll be watching over a lot of people, and that's a lot, and everybody has special needs that is unique to them, or learns in a specific way. So you have to be able to be good with people and communicate and be able to balance everything while doing all the other stuff as well. Oh, we can't hear you. You're still muted. Yes, you are still muted right now. We can hear you now, I think.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So other question that came in was talking about the separation of um, how many different, roles are there in an animation studio? And is this something that you learn when you are in school? Like when you're in school, do they separate those roles as well? Or is that something that when you get into the studio, you're just like, oh wow, there's a rigging department and there's somebody whose job is only layouts, and oh, there's somebody who, do you learn that in school, or is that only in the studio, and how many of those roles exist?
Right. Okay. So there's a lot of roles. I don't know if I could put a number to it because, okay, remember I was saying I wasn't that great at art? Well, you know what? I was worse at math. So math is not my strong suit. But there's definitely a lot of them. And I think it depends on the school that you go to. Um, the way that the Sheridan program was structured, it actually was trying to teach us what the industry was like, but of course it will never be exactly what the industry is because it's still within the safe walls of school. So what we did in third year is we actually made a group film, and then in fourth year we did our own independent film. So for those of you that have actually made an animated film together or on your own, then you kind of know what the pipeline is like in order to come up with that final product. But I wouldn't say that every school necessarily teaches what each of the roles are. There are some people that I'm working with that have come from other schools that didn't know that there was a department just for people setting up scenes and didn't know that compositing was a thing And if there's anyone here that doesn't know what that is, that's okay. Compositing basically is the department of people that take the layouts, or sorry, not the layouts, because at that point they're painted. So they take the backgrounds, they take the animation, they take the effects, they add any kind of lighting, any kind of effects to it, like beyond the drawn effects, like any glows or adding transparencies and things like that. And then from there it goes on to sound. So a lot of people aren't aware of compositing, they aren't aware of setup, they are aware of the audio department, and they also aren't aware of production. Production is like one of the most important parts of the animation pipeline, because those are the people that keep track of what actually needs to get done by when, what resources we have, what assets we have, where they are, how to find them. Like they're like, the way that productions go, you have your production team, and then you have your directors, and like supervisor team, and they come together and keep everything like going. So there's that as well. And I think that, if there's anybody that wants to learn about those roles, obviously working in a studio is a way to learn about them, but you can also talk to people that work in the industry, that work in those different positions, or you can go on a studio tour. In studio tours, they'll usually show you each department, and then you can be like, oh, I didn't know there's setup. And then you will see those people.
Right. Right. So I want to jump to there's another question that I want to jump to, going back to the animations. So there's always been this debate, and I stopped having this debate because I just don't think it makes sense. I think everybody can turn on a TV and see what's what. There's always been this debate that, oh, 2D is dead, 3D is taking over, and what I've seen, what I've seen honestly is on the big screen maybe 3D rules, but on the small screen I've seen tons and tons of 2D animation. And one of the things in particular that strikes me is that a lot of the 3D movies have become 2D animated series instead of 3D animated series. And it's very interesting because I think Puss in Boots is probably the only 3D, or one of the only 3D movies that became a 3D series, but Tangled became a 2D series. Big Hero 6 became a 2D series. The Croods became a 2D series. Why do you think that is? Why do they not stick with 3D? Why is it they decide to go to 2D for those animations?
Absolutely, that's a great question. Now I'm not an executive of DreamWorks or anything, but I can definitely make an educated guess, and I'm pretty sure this is what it is. It's just the fact that 3D, to do a show in 3D to the same level of quality as a feature film, is a lot of money and a lot of time. That's
Right.
not to say that like they couldn't get the money for it, but like just to make the movie itself, just the production part will take at least a year to do the
Right.
one film, right? And for animation TV series, it will still take about a year for production too, but that's doing usually 22-minute episodes for the whole year. So again, I'm not so good at math, so I don't know if it like ends up being about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Anyway, for like a movie across the whole year versus like 22-minute episodes, you probably get like about 10 to 12 of those.
Yeah. I mean, it
I think
makes
it does
sense
work
to
out to
me.
be about the same, but
Right.
also like with 3D shows and 3D movies, you have to allow for time for rendering as well.
Right. Right.
And that's sort of, I think, more of what it is. It would take so much longer. Now there are
Yeah.
3D shows that are TV shows that are out that still need to be rendered, but the approach for the animation is not as detailed usually
Yeah.
anyway as feature animation is, just because like there's not enough time.
No,
Yeah.
I definitely see with what you're saying because I watch Puss in Boots and How to Train Your Dragon the series, and
Yeah.
two of the things that immediately jump out to me is like for one, the backgrounds are far simpler in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Like far simpler in the series, and then the textures are also far simpler. Like Puss, when you look at the amount of furs on him, they're complete like
Mm-hmm.
less furs.
Yeah.
With How to Train Your Dragon, the skin texture is a lot, paler and it looks less, like less polygons. So
Yes.
they definitely seem to make some compromises where 3D is concerned. But on top of it, I'll be honest, I do like what they've done with some of the 2D series like Tangled and Big Hero 6. Like Tangled is one show that I didn't think would make a good transition to 2D, but
Me
um,
neither, but here we
I
are.
guess like what you're, yeah, here we are. But I guess it's it's a testament to how much the principles, how far the principles go in making things appealing, no matter what style
Absolutely.
you use, as long as you're following the principles.
Exactly.
Um,
Also, just real quick, there is one other thing too, and that's that it maybe the most important thing actually is that feature films have a massive, massive, massive crew. You sit in a movie theater and you watch the credits going for like 5 minutes, and then you watch an animated show and the credits go by and it goes by in 2 seconds. We have significantly less people on TV productions as well. With a feature film, a lot of the times you'll get like a scene and you'll be able to work on it for weeks. But in TV animation, you get a scene and you have to be done it in a few days. Not even a few days, a couple days. You have a chunk of scenes to do and you have to finish all of those in a week, as opposed to working on one thing for like a month. So there's that too.
so here's another question now. Where is it? Yes, this question now. How often should you revamp your portfolio? I'm asking this question because I teach, and one of the things that we're always pressing for students to do is to revamp their portfolios, and
Hmm.
for some reason they don't. For some reason the same stuff they had at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year when you want to see their portfolio, it's the same stuff that's in there. And when I think a lot of people, a lot of animation students, underestimate how much people their teachers know. So a lot
Hmm.
of times when someone says, "Hey, I need someone who can do this," and then I'm asking students, "Hey, let me see your portfolio," and they're sending me stuff like um, something drawn on a piece of paper with pencil, and they take a picture of it in very poor lighting, and it's grainy and not that great to look at. How important is it to revamp how often should you revamp your portfolio? Um, and how should you present your portfolio?
A good question. So, um, for any of the students that are in the chat right now, sorry to tell you, but you should update your portfolio regularly. Regularly. Like at least I would say once a year, twice a year is probably better. Depending on if you're working or not, right? Because it's really important to keep your portfolio up to date, because if you have stuff from like 5 years ago, when somebody is looking at your portfolio, they're gonna think, okay, what have you done between now and like 5 years ago? You know? Um, so it's really important to do that. That being said, I haven't updated my portfolio in a while, and I will speak to that. A lot of it is because of NDA stuff, so I can't actually, because of my contracts, put anything in my portfolio yet because it hasn't come out yet. So there's that too. And a lot of the what people struggle with once they start in the industry is, balancing work with your own personal projects. It's very, very hard to do because you spend so much creative energy during the day at work, and then to work on your own stuff after, it's like you're out of juice by the end of the day. But it's important to still work on your own things. Sometimes people will work on projects and then the projects will get canceled, and like that whole year that they spent working on something, they have nothing to show for it. Um, and I mean, they'll still get paid, so they have money to show for it, but nothing art-wise. So it's important to do that stuff because even if the show gets canceled, you still have something that can showcase your skills. And if anything happens and you do need to find a new job, your portfolio is already on the go. I'm not sure how big Twitter was in Jamaica too, when there were people going around being like, hey, if there's Black artists out there, show us your portfolios, share your work, da 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 da. And so many of us were like, oh my gosh, like I have nothing to show because whatever. And if you're somebody that has your portfolio updated all the time, if there's something like that where there's a sudden job fair that comes up or studios coming around, or an opportunity is opened up like right like out of nowhere, then you have something to show, and you're good. Don't be like me and some of the rest of us where we're like, well, I don't have anything. But with that being said, I actually dug up my portfolio from when I graduated, if you guys want to see it, because your portfolio also needs to be very neat and
Yes.
easy to read. So I can share that if you want to see it. This is from 2014, so I've done a lot more since then. But I'll share my screen and you can see what it looks like from start to finish. And this portfolio again is my graduation one, so this is like student level basically before industry. Now, some of you might be
Mm.
thinking, can you show your portfolio after that? No, I'm sorry. But I can show you some of the art that I've done on the side, just for fun kind of thing.
Okay,
So
yeah,
we'll
I
just
think
share
I think
my
people
screen.
definitely see that. I guess while you look for it, somebody,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Oh,
you're
I've got
sharing
it
screen.
here.
Oh, it's here.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead, show it.
yeah. So I had it in an actual portfolio case, but I had a digital version as well on my website, which needs to be updated. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. Don't type in the URL 'cause it's not updated. Um, so that was my title page, and then I had these character models. They're rigged actually. So these are flash rigs that I made for my student film. And then these are my character designs. So I did all of these character designs for a specific project for YouTube. It was actually during an internship summer, so I threw some of those in there. And as you can see, like I was giving the clients different options to choose from. I think I still remember the ones that they went with. They really liked, I think, this one, or maybe it was this one. No, I think it was this one. And then for this ice cream guy, they really liked this one. And they specifically asked for like a really gross looking ice cream guy, so that's why they're all gross. I'm sorry. Um, and then going to the next, I put in my color scripts from my film to show some like, a little bit of color experience that I've got. These are my layouts. As you can see, they're very, very simple layouts because layout is not my focus. I don't enjoy layout very much. This is some sketches from, cafe sketching, caricaturing, a little bit of life drawing. This one at the top is from the life drawing class. And then these are just from being out and about. I got some more people sketches. And as you can see, if you've noticed, like each of the things that I have, they have the same formatting. Like there's the black backdrop and the images are placed over top and the text is in white and it kept it uniform. And that's not to say that your portfolio has to look like that, but if it has some kind of uniformity to it or a basic graphic design level of organization, it presents very well. I put some storyboards that I did in as well. This is from my third year group film project. I think I have some more boards. There is another set of boards that I did. Oops. And then these are some location designs that I did for the client that I had earlier with the character designs. They had me on layouts too, so I did some location designs as well. And that was it. And oh my gosh, I forgot I put my demo reel in here too. You guys want to see my demo reel? There's no audio. Uh,
Nobody's gonna say no, so you're gonna just have to show it.
I will show it. I'm sorry there isn't any audio. There isn't much anyway. So in my demo, I have some music playing in the background from Phoenix Wright, actually, which is one of my favorite games. So whenever you do have a demo reel, usually you need to credit the song, but I didn't in this case. I don't think. I can't remember. It was a whole 6 years ago. But I'll just play it and kind of talk over it since you guys can't hear it anyway. I think I still have it up on Vimeo, so I'll take a look and see if I can find it. But this is my animation from when I was graduating, so it's really hard for me to watch now. But to kind of give you some context of what student work was like for me back then, and yeah, it is what it is. And most of it is footage from my student film, and this is the YouTube show that I was working on. So this one is my student film with the cat. I just thought with the character designs, and then the others were from that studio. And then this clip playing now is a student assignment, showcasing that I can do a pan with the character running. But my demo reel is mostly focused on animation. So it starts with a title card, ends with a title card. I'll talk about demo reels real quick because I'm sure that will come up at some point too. Demo reel should be short, a minute-ish to 2 minutes, maybe if you want it to feel really long, as much as you need. I would stick to a minute. Showcase your best animation first, and like your second best animation or third best animation last. So whoever's watching it, like they'll only, if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's looking to hire animators, and they have like 800 demo reels to go through, they're not going to watch every single one, especially if they're like 10 minutes long. So they'll watch it, and if they're gripped from the beginning with like the skill, then they'll keep watching to see if they like what they see. If you start off with something that's really weak, they'll probably assume the entire demo reel is weak and not watch the whole thing. And if they make it to the end, you want them to remember something good from it, and they're not going to remember the thing that they saw first. They're going to remember the thing they saw last. So that is why you want to start off strong and end strong and keep it short.
Great, great. All right, so there are some questions that I missed that I want to just make sure I capture. There's one from, and I hope I pronounce this with name right. It's either Shiem or Sheem Ramsey. Is it absolutely necessary to attend a college course to become a professional animator?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. No, not at all. The director on Hilda, he never went to animation school.
Wow. I hope that's one of those things Mercury is allowing you to tell us.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he talked about it. But yeah,
Okay.
you don't have to go to school for it. If you've got the skill, that's cool.
All right. The other question is from Dale Bennessy. He says, apart from an NDA, are there any other contracts that you have to sign working for a studio?
Usually yes. So NDAs are to, protect our clients and things like that. But there's also contracts like, within regular studio policy, making sure everybody understands what the studio policy is. And that's sort of a more sort of general workplace kind of contract. And then, of course, there's a contract in terms of the project itself. So, depending on the studio that you're at, you'll either be hired as a full-time employee. So, no matter what shows come through, they'll keep you on. And then, once your show is done, they'll cycle you on to the next show. And on some other studios, they'll sign you on contract base. So, the contract is only for that show specifically. So once your contract ends, you're either looking for a new job elsewhere or you're hoping that the studio is going to keep you on. And that's why a portfolio updated all the time is really, really important, because once your contract ends, you don't know if you're going to stay at the same studio. You don't know if you have to find work elsewhere. But these days, work has been pretty steady in Canada. So, or at least in Ottawa anyway. So in Ottawa, people tend to stay at the same studios for a while. My friends in Toronto tend to jump around a little bit more, but not everyone. So it just depends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a great point for both students and trainers, because one of the problems, I don't want to call it a problem. One of the concerns that we have in Jamaica, and by we I mean the government, training institutions, students, parents, is when my child goes to do animation, are they going to get a steady job? And I think when you say to them that the jobs are, I don't want to use the word intermittent, but like you said, you're working from project to project in most cases.
Yep.
Rarely you'll find a studio that has enough of its own IP or enough work to keep you on
Yep.
fairly permanently. When people hear that, they start to get scared and go, "Oh man, why didn't I push my child to medicine or law?" Which oddly enough, there are in the news right now. They're talking about how they're going to find doctors' jobs because there's a shortage of jobs for doctors, and
Oh wow.
a lot of lawyers have for a long time had to be, you know, doing what they call trunk lawyering. You know, where they just kind of just drive around with everything in their trunk because they don't have an office. But the perception is still there that their jobs are secure, so it's hard for them to wrap their mind. But I think it's
Yeah.
interesting talking to like you and people like Wayne Carnegie and some other
Mhm.
persons who, for them, it's so normal that, oh yeah, when this
Yeah.
project is done, I'm out of work and I'm going to be looking for another one. You know, that I don't think people understand
Yeah.
that lifestyle.
I know, and to be fair, actually, I don't really either because because Mercury doesn't really do that. They hire people on
Yeah,
full time.
right,
But that being said, like it's what the reality is for a lot of people in the industry,
right,
and it's a normal thing. So you don't even wait for your contract to end. You know the contract is ending, and then
right,
you are applying.
right, right.
You know,
Excellent point.
and
Excellent. So excellent point
yeah.
for maintaining your portfolio frequently,
Mhm.
and also excellent strategy in terms of always applying. Because the whole thing is that you're not being fired because you did a bad job. You're being
Exactly.
laid off because the project's done. Because it's not uncommon for you to be called back for the continuation of the project when they get the funding.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Right.
all about the timing. And
Right.
if they've got something lined up and they know they want to keep you, they will keep you. And if you go to apply to another job and you really want to stay at the studio you're working at, if they want to keep you, there's nothing stopping you from saying like, hey, you know what, other job, like, never mind. Unless you sign paperwork, then you have to go, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the other part of it that I never really thought about, because as a student graduating, I was afraid of that being contract to contract, and then I ended up here not having to do contract to contract. But what my friends would talk about was that, listen, okay, contract to contract, yes, maybe you might not have employee benefits because you're working for a few months, maybe the whole year, but if your contract ends and you don't have something lined up like right away, maybe you start in like a couple months vacation, and so they would do that a lot and just take time off to reset. And honestly, I think it's kind of a nice thing to have time off between
Right.
projects,
Yeah.
especially the end of a project. The end of a project, everybody is like sweating, they're working hard, or trying to meet that last deadline, and then everybody's tired. And it's
Yeah.
great to have that time off too. But if you can plan it
Right.
that way, that's cool. But not everything
Right.
is gonna line up perfectly. So
Exactly. And this kind of boils into the next question by Joel McFarlane, which
mhm.
is how do you manage your work life balance?
Woo! Well,
And
once you guys find out, let me know. I'm just kidding. It's a really good question, and it's something that people talk about all the time. I think the best way to do it is to make sure that you do your work during the hours that you're supposed to work, and when those hours are done, leave that work in the building, leave that work in the computer if you're working from home still. Um, just make sure you turn your brain off and don't think about work when you're cooking, don't think about work when you're gardening, don't think about work when you're shopping, because if you keep thinking about it, you're going to keep wanting to do it, and that's how people end up
that's so true.
overworking and burning out. And once you're burnt out, then the work that you put out isn't as good, and then it's like, well, my work coming out
Mm.
isn't as good, so I have to work harder. And it's like, no, you need to stop and take a break. And it feels counterintuitive, but taking a break
Definitely.
and resting is an investment in yourself and your energy. So it's very important to do that. So work-life balance isn't just a thing of how do I balance work and life. It's more like making sure that you keep yourself at your optimal level so that you can always be performing as best as you can. Um, and, uh, you know, it comes with practice and it's not something perfect. So if your work life balance is out of whack, like, please don't beat yourself up over it. It happens. We're all dealing with it. I'm sure we all have parents that struggle with work life balance that are in different industries too. So it's kind of a universal thing. You just have to keep working on it. And if it's kind of out of hand right now, try to get back centered. And if you've got it on lock, who enjoy it, and hopefully it will last for a very long time.
Excellent. All right, so I have a few more questions for you. And here's a question I've
Mm-hmm.
been dying to answer, but I decided to leave
Mm-hmm.
it till late because I didn't know how deep this answer would get. But
Yep.
of late, we've been reading a lot, and I've heard people saying that, boy, this confirms a lot of things for them or has opened their eyes. But we've been reading a lot about discrimination in the animation
Mm-hmm.
industry, both with
Yes.
color and gender. I want to know one, if you've had any of those personal experiences, or if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't, if you know people who have had those experiences. Is it something that, I mean, I know you haven't worked in America, but I'm just wondering if it's something that's more prevalent in America than it is in Canada, or is Canada just like America, but just a little understated, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that there are very few women in your office, or you have quite a few women there?
All right, it's a great question, and I'd love to talk about it because, as you guys know, there's not as many Black people in the industry in Canada. So, in terms of discrimination, I personally haven't experienced any, and I don't know anybody that has experienced any within the studio standpoint. Maybe from individuals working in the studio, but not the studio. That's not to say it doesn't exist though. I've only worked at a handful of places, and so I can only speak to those experiences. But I think depending on where you go, some areas like Toronto, I think is really really great for a lot of different cultures, a lot of different races, and even genders and things like that. Um, and it may be different from experiences in Montreal. I've never worked in Montreal, so I don't know, but I know going to Montreal is a different experience from being in Ontario. And if you guys are not sure, Montreal is in Quebec, which is another province in Canada that is primarily French speaking. So there's a little bit of stuff there, but anyway, personally, I haven't experienced much. There isn't a lot of Black people in the animation industry. We need way, 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 way more, I think, because our stories need to be told by
Yeah.
us because we know
I
what's up.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, how many productions have you worked on that have people of color in it? Whether black,
Mhm,
Asian, Indian, whatever.
mhm.
And I mean both Indians as in Hindu
Yes,
Indians and Indians as in, I hate to call them Native Americans because they're Americans first,
yes.
and
Well,
people decided to call them Native, but
yes,
yeah.
we actually call them Indigenous people in Canada.
Okay.
So if you want
Yeah.
to use that term, that one kind of sits a little
All
bit
right.
better
That's not. Yeah. That
than
sits a little
Native
better with me.
American. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what they still use in the U.S. I'm not sure, but yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. So actually, yeah, there's a lot of diversity in that regard. So there's a lot of people from different parts of the world or presenting from different parts of the world because they might all be born in Canada but don't all
Mhm.
look white. So there's a lot of diversity in that way. I would say it's still majority white people, but I would say it's not majority men anymore. There's a lot of women in the industry. There's a lot of women in the animation schools as well. My
Mhm.
graduating class was mostly women. My friend who graduated before me, her graduating class is mostly women. The year after me, like it's a lot of women getting into the industry. I don't think
Nice.
that it's because more women are getting interested. I think maybe it's just, you know, it just is what it is. But there's a lot more women coming in, and actually, there's a lot of women who are in production roles and in director roles too. I wouldn't say that it's a majority, but there are a lot of them. So it's not just a case of like glass ceiling for women and glass ceiling for Black people from
Right.
my
Right.
experience. As you guys know, I'm an animation supervisor, so like I'm moving up the chain too. That's not to say it doesn't exist elsewhere. So I think that if you're going to apply to a studio and you're not sure if it's going to be the right environment because it might be discriminatory or maybe there's not enough people of color there or whatever it is, I would say when you're being interviewed by someone, remember that you're also interviewing the studio to see if it's the right place for you, not just if
Yeah.
you're the right fit for them. So it's great to get a tour if you can. Obviously, a tour during the workday so you can actually see people and see how people interact. If, like, you know, I'm gonna be like a bit silly, but like if you go into a studio and everybody's hunched over at their desk and like shaking and like there's a bunch of food at their desk and they all look miserable, like maybe that's not the best place to work, you know. If you can get a tour and actually see the people that are working there, and if it seems like they're focused, or if they're a bit more friendly, if it's like a smaller studio space, if they're, you know, engaging and are being supportive and helpful, like those kinds of things are things that you can look out for to hopefully see or try to gauge what the studio culture is like. And there's nothing to say, like, if you get hired somewhere and it's really unsafe for you because of your gender or your race or whatever, like there's nothing to say that you can't leave, because you need to be safe wherever you work, like first, regardless of contracts or anything like that.
Okay.
But yeah, that being said, though,
Um,
it's pretty good.
all right. I'm seeing some questions in the question and answer section. Let me try to display on
Mm-hmm.
screen. Do you see it?
Yes, I do. Okay, I will uh, answer this first, and then I'll click the check mark because I think it will go away. Cool. So that is a good question. I think, or actually, I should probably read it because I don't think everyone can see it. So, the question is, where do you go to learn 2D effects animation? I always see it get pushed behind at my schools. Oh, okay, cool. Now I have to read it. Cool. All right. So yeah, I've noticed that too as well. 2D effects animation isn't really like there's no effects classes. I'm not sure why that is. If I had to guess, it's because animation is usually treated as a service industry and we always need more animators. Animators are like the biggest chunk of the teams. You have like this much animators and like this much background people and like this much design people and like everybody else is like this much. So I would say probably the schools, because like back in the day they're trying to pump out people that can actually get jobs. They're like, well, let's focus on animation, let's focus on backgrounds, let's focus on painting, sort of thing. So when it comes to effects, I would say a lot of the people that I do know working in effects are either self-taught or taught by someone on the job. But if you know your animation principles from animating characters, that will at least give you a foundation to then apply it to effects animation. The Elemental Magic book, I think, is the one that everybody has studied effects animation
Mental
from.
magic book. Okay.
Yeah. Let me
In the
make sure
chat.
that's actually what it's called. But Elemental Magic goes over all of the basic um, types of effects that you would kind of go through. So like fire, wind, smoke, lightning, you know, all that sort of stuff. And then there's plenty of effects animators out there, you know, putting out their effects reels, and it's great to check those out and really pay attention to them, because, like, you know, we be out here watching stuff and paying attention to the characters, but some of this effects animation is out of this world, like unbelievable. I won't talk about my project, but I know the effects team right now is working on an incredible sequence with a lot of wind blowing around, and it looks amazing. Like, it doesn't look like the real thing, it looks better than the real thing. So I would say if there's anybody interested in studying effects animation, definitely check out that book. Study up on your basic principles that everybody learns for character animation and stuff, and then look at people's effects reels and try to pay attention to effects in animated things. And also, I've been noticing recently, kind of on a side note, that there's been a lot of effects animation in music videos lately too.
This is
So
true.
if you're watching music videos and you see effects in it, like, really watch those and try to study them. I think those are the places that I would recommend learning from. And there's always a need for effects people. So yeah.
Good. Right, let me bring up the next question real
Uh-huh.
quick. So there are plenty of roles, as mentioned before, and more so roles that aren't as heavily bombarded like character animators. But which do you find studios want but aren't getting much of right now or recently?
Perfect. Effects. We need more in general. I wouldn't say that's like a trend everywhere, but definitely effects. I think there's not as much interest whenever I talk to students and stuff too, most of them want to do character animation. Not a lot of them want to do effects. So effects is definitely one of them. I would say compositing is another one of them. Again, not because there's a shortage, but because it's such an important role. But there's not as much interest in it in school. So I would definitely say those two. There's a lot of people that are into doing backgrounds and layouts and designs and stuff, and of course animation. But those two, I think, in the production
Yeah.
of the pipeline are the ones that are usually overlooked. Setup is important too, but I think that anybody that understands animation enough can fill the setup role, and it's more of like I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like it's almost like clerical in a way because you're not animating anything, you're just putting things together. But it's so important. Like if we don't have those people, like the whole production would fall apart. So that's not something that you necessarily need to train for if you already know how animation works and how to put it together and stuff. But definitely effects and compositing.
So I want to revisit this question because I don't think we answered it properly.
Okay.
Want to attempt to answer it properly. This is from
Mm-hmm.
Asher Brown. So what she was asking earlier was how does one get in on the training program mentioned, and we had said that the training program at Mercury was something
Mm-hmm.
maybe one off. But I think in general it would be interesting to know like are there any training programs that exist that someone can pursue, whether after graduating or even if they just have skills, don't want to go to university, but want to get some kind of training that helps mimic that studio situation? Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is
Yeah.
it, because I understand where she's coming from. Like
Mm-hmm.
in Jamaica, there's this big gap between studio and school, and you've confirmed that that
Yeah.
exists in Canada as well. Most
Yeah.
likely, it's everywhere. And I do know the government's working on an apprenticeship program, but COVID-19 has kind of killed that. Um, so, are there any training programs, whether online or in person, that people can do that more closely mimic the studio environment?
I got you. Okay. Yes. So I
Hopefully,
haven't
I'm
done.
representing Asha's question accurately.
It looks like that's the case in the chat there. But yes, perfect. Okay, so yeah, there are some. Unfortunately, I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I do remember one of my friends that was working at Mercury and actually later on moved on to work at Sony for Into the Spider-Verse, and I think is working on at Blue Sky right now. He actually did, I think, I Animate
I
part
animate.
time.
Oh, I've heard
Yeah.
of that.
Um, so there's definitely programs you can take online. They do cost money, I think, to help build up your skills a bit further. There's things like Animation Mentor, maybe Skillshare, and like other things like that. People have their Patreons. They'll put up things sometimes like tutorials or offer mentoring and things like that. Gumroad, there are people that will put up tutorials and things there too that you can pay for to get a little bit of extra training. I would say that the internet is probably the best place to go for any of those programs. I remember one of my friends that is a character designer did this really cool mentorship program with Grizz, I think is how she says her name. It's either Grizz or Gree, but from Grizz and Norm. I'll type in their. I think they have a website, but unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the program that she did, but she got to work directly with this designer and have mentorship for like 2 or 3 months or something like that.
Right.
I'm putting the link in right now.
While you search for the link,
Hmm.
you put the link in. Okay, great. Yeah,
Yeah.
Chevany Chevas is here. She is an educator. She's taught animation at quite a few institutions here in Jamaica, and she's currently the animation coordinator at the University of the West Indies. And
Hmm.
she is the brand manager at JANN. She was
Hmm.
mentioning Animation Lounge, which is a program situated in Canada, if I remember correctly, and it's run by a lady that I think it does that sort of training, through several different projects. So I think
Hmm.
that's something else that people can check out. Animation. I'll put the link in later on. Thank you for the link that you posted. We'll definitely check that
For
out as
sure.
well.
So the link that I posted was just their website to give some
Yeah.
context, but it was a program where people could get paired up with an industry professional and just get one-on-one mentoring. So I think there's
Oh,
a lot of
nice.
things available out there right now that people can do, but it's more internet-based, I think, than it is, going to a building, an establishment or whatever, and getting training that way.
Okay, cool. So my little boy wants to join me.
Hello. Okay, bye.
And he's gone again.
As they
All
do.
right. Yeah, as they do. Okay, great. All right. So let's see. Is Ryan asking something? I know we see the source of the background noise. Yes. All right. So one of the questions I wanted to ask, and the reason I'm saving this one asked is simply because I know you're animation supervisor, but you're not a studio exec. But I just wanted to know if you either had any idea or even just your personal thoughts on what a studio should expect from graduates. Because like I said, out here studios are expecting that when they come out of school, they're ready to work in the studio with minimal training. I guess the most they're expecting is that, we'll train them on the specifics of this particular project, but they're
Right.
not expecting to train them on Toon Boom or train them on, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think studios should expect from their from graduates?
Right. That's a good question. I think if it were me and I had the power to hire someone, what I would want to see is some of these things. So from their portfolio, I would want to see that it's really neat and organized, because to me that will let me know that they will be organized on the team. From an interview, I would, whatever interview questions they answer, like, would be answers that I'm like, yes, good. In terms of skill, I think as long as somebody shows that they can draw decently well or understand forms and shapes and volumes in the sense of, like, you're going to draw a character or animate a character on frame 1, and then on frame 10 you don't want them to look like they grew like twice as big. That's really important. And in their demo reel for animation, if it was for an animation position, at least understanding the basic principles. So you guys saw my demo reel. It was hard for me to watch it. It's not the level of animation that I can do now at all. But you can
Yep.
see from the demo itself that, like, at the time, like, I was trying to get the look that I wanted because I understood the principles. I just didn't know how to execute it. And that's what I think the studio should expect to see. It should expect to see potential, but not the actual ability to, hit the ground running. It should be somebody that can actually, like, be organized and communicate and understand what you're talking about when you are asking revisions from them. If I say, this section needs more squash and stretch, or it's missing an antic, or it's too stiff, I need to know that I can say that to a new hire and have them understand. And if they didn't understand, that's fine. I would still explain it to them. But there's a difference between maybe not understanding what is being asked in the moment and not
Right.
understanding the concept at all.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
get you.
what I
So
would look for.
in other words, if you have an intern and you say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this needs some more squash and stretch, needs some more antics, and you leave for an hour or two to go to a meeting, you're hoping that when you come back, they've tried something that you can look
Yeah.
at and go, oh no, that's too much stretch, or no, instead of coming back two
Mm-hmm.
hours later and they haven't done anything, and then you're wondering, why didn't you do anything? It's like, I didn't understand what you meant, so I was just kind of stuck here looking around trying to
Exactly,
figure it out.
exactly.
Right.
Because again, I've been saying that I'm coming from a place of animation, but I'm also coming from a place of TV animation. We ain't got time. Nobody can be sitting down for like 2 hours and not doing anything. Especially when most supervisors are more than happy to sit down with somebody and explain it properly to them in a way that they understand. Because again, everybody understands things differently. Some people are visual, some people like more written word and stuff like that, or some people prefer to be told. So in those different ways, it can change.
Right.
But if someone is sitting at their desk for an hour and doesn't know what to do, but isn't communicating that they don't know what to do, that is a big red flag. And that's not somebody that typically people want to work with either, because we have deadlines and we have a pipeline, and everything that everybody does affects the entire pipeline from the top all the way to the bottom. So if you can't communicate, like, if you have something and you're not sure you're going to hit the deadline, rather than sit at your desk being like, I don't know if I'm going to hit the deadline, you tell somebody so we can plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
So,
that's really important.
so Asha's asking a question, and interestingly enough, it's sort of a question I had as well. So she said she tried Googling setup artist and the internet doesn't seem to know what I'm talking about. So is there another way to find these jobs slash another name that they go by? And I'll tag on to that to also say, you mentioned things like
Yes.
compositing, etc. Are there ways to find demo reels of these different roles to see what they entail? Because maybe I want to be a composite artist and maybe I think I have the skills, but
Mm-hmm.
then if I see a reel, I might be like, oh, I have some more work to do. So
Right,
how
right.
can you find these jobs and find reels so that you can understand them better?
For sure. So setup is hard because you can't have a reel for that.
Mhm.
Which I don't think is what maybe Asha was asking, but for setup,
Right. Mhm.
it's maybe called different things in different studios. So in Mercury, it's called setup. I think at my other studio, I can't remember what we called it, but it was something within the same like uh, terminology, but maybe a slightly different word, like
Right.
put together or scene planning. Sometimes I've seen it called that before,
Mhm.
um, or whatever. But basically,
Has it ever
the
has it
idea
ever
is
been
that you're
called
putting it
something?
together.
Has
Mhm.
it ever been called something like scene breakdown or
I haven't
um
seen that,
no?
but
Okay.
it could be like this. I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
It
Right.
could be
Right.
something like that, but basically it would be something along the lines of the person that puts the scene together is what it is. So if setup artist isn't coming up, because I think that might be a bit too broad of a term,
Right.
because
Right.
it doesn't have animation in it in the name. Maybe like animation setup or animation scene planning. Actually, I think at Mercury we call it scene planning, but then like within the studio we call it setup department.
Okay. Understood.
So maybe try scene planning, but for looking for a compositing reel, I don't know if I've ever seen one, but they must exist.
Mhm.
Compositing will always be what the final product looks like on the screen,
Right.
but it's usually stuff that you can do in After Effects. So I haven't seen any personally, but I think if someone were to search it up, that they would come up, because compositing is unlike setup or scene planning, is a role that can have a demo in it.
Right.
So they must exist. I've never seen them.
I'm gonna check it out. So Diane has a question.
Hmm.
Says, well, Shireen Peart says VFX houses usually have compositing reels,
Right, yeah,
and
that
that
they
is
do.
true. I've seen
Yeah,
reels where basically they'll show you the scene before compositing, and then they
yes.
have a white transition effect that shows you what it looks like after compositing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but so, our Diane's question is: assuming Melissa is able to speak about studio technology, which is more common, animators working remote oh sorry animators working on remote slash virtual machines in an effort to prevent the ability to copy files, or working on full-fledged computers, also studio technology. Is it common for the animation studio to also handle audio or just lip sync?
Okay, good question. I think it's more common for animators to work on full-fledged computers, but IT will set it up so that you can't actually remove anything from those computers, depending on how big the studio is. So that's part of our NDA protection. We can't move files outside of the studio. Obviously, now with COVID happening, that's different. So we can, but usually it's a full-fledged computer. And that's for animators. For other positions like backgrounds and design and stuff, sometimes it's freelance, so you don't even really need a remote or virtual machine. You can just work on whatever, and as long as you hand in your stuff within the right file format, the right sizing, the right naming conventions and stuff, then you're good to go. As for studios handling audio, yes, absolutely. That's very, very common. Some studios have a dedicated sound team and some don't. But it's important for the studio to handle audio because beyond the lip sync, because if the audio is not synced up correctly when they send it to the client's gonna watch it and be like, "All this animation is great, but like none of the audio is what's going on." But that being said, a lot of the times when we get Leicas and stuff from clients, it's without the final background music. It just has a scratch track on it. So we'll do the audio so that it syncs up correctly with the lip sync, and I guess maybe with the scratch track, depending on whether it's an IP or not or whatever, or if they provide that stuff. But like they'll take the version of the episode that we send them, and then they'll actually do the final mix with the music and everything. So that would be out of house in that case.
Okay, okay. Well, all right. So it's 2:55. We're heading towards 3 o'clock, which is when this meeting is supposed to end. So what I want you to do is just give us some final words. Any advice you have for animators or even persons who want to start a studio. Any advice you can give or motivation, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Let's see. I would say in this day and age, animation is huge and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now it's all knock on wood, make sure you don't jinx it or whatever. But animation is growing at a crazy, crazy rate to the point where a lot of studios are constantly looking for people. So if there's any time to get interested in animation, it is now. You don't have to work in a studio either to do animation and be a successful person and to get experience. It wouldn't be studio experience, but there is so many resources and software you can get, tutorials and things online, platforms for you to post things and share things, that it's easier now more than ever to get your own projects out there, and really just get your message out. If there's anything that you want to really say to the world with animation, uh, there's plenty of free programs that you can use to do that. I would say if you don't want to do it alone, get a team together, make your own film together, submit it to film festivals, get yourself seen out there. And if your goal is to work in the studio, the more that you do that, that still counts as experience. So the more experience you will have. And then you'll just be missing the studio part, which is kind of the office politics part. And whatever, we can get that part. But if you know how a production works, if you know how to put something together, please do, and don't feel like if you don't have a studio position that you can't do animation, because you absolutely can, and people will still love it. People love independent projects on the internet. I'm sure some of you guys have seen things like Has Been Hotel and the Lackadaisy animated project that's coming out. Things on Patreon like Critical Role is getting their own animated series. People are funding their ideas through GoFundMe's and Kickstarter and stuff like that if it's an issue of money. There's a lot of resources available out there. And if you love animation, do the thing. um, and then also, I would love to just put it out there that, even though I'm out here in Ottawa, I would love to keep in contact. And if there's anybody that wants to ask more questions or reach out, you can find me on Instagram under Melissa Lyn 21. Send me a DM. And I will see what I can do. Please, within reason, though. Like,
Of course.
I'm not going to be able to give somebody a full animation course or anything like that. But I'd be happy to help and mentor and guide people along and be a part and pop in now and then too. It's been really great to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me here today. And I hope that you guys learned a lot and feel inspired to make some stuff.
Definitely think we learned a lot, and we really do appreciate you taking the time out to come and share this knowledge with us. Because we've always wanted that insight from a studio perspective. And best believe we
Mm-hmm.
will be contacting you in the future, because one of the several things that Jan, wants to provide are things like mentorship, as well as things like even portfolio reviews,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, workshops. Because like I myself would love to know how to animate like Tangled, with rigs and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, but I know you can't share too many secrets from Mercury, but I'm sure there's some basics that you could share. But
Oh, for sure.
definitely,
Yeah.
portfolio reviewing is something that we think is very, very important. And we wouldn't be burdening you alone. There are other animators from around the world that we were of, like Wayne Carnegie, who is also in Canada, and Frederick Lynn, and we have a
Mm-hmm.
few friends in the US, but we always want that perspective from a professional level to help hone our skills, portfolio wise.
For sure. Yeah.
I was going to end on that. I was going to end on that note because it's like three on the dot, but I know this
Yeah.
particular person would kill me if I didn't ask their question. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, wow, two questions just showed up. These are the last two questions, guys. Sorry, but yeah. So the first
That is
question is,
okay.
what are some of the things that you do or have observed to, I think you meant de-stress during and
Mm-hmm.
after a project? I think you did cover a little bit of it, but if you have something else to add in terms
Yeah,
of
for
de-stressing.
sure. That's really relevant right now.
Hmm.
So a lot of the things that I usually will do, besides COVID, because COVID makes it more tricky to deal with. Um, the things that I would do is go outside, spend time in like forests and stuff, just be around nature, unplug, get away from the phone, get away from screens, do things that I really love that are more tactile. So I don't just love animating, I also love making things. I love painting. Um, I love singing. I'm not good at singing though. I love dancing. I'm not good at dancing either. But I do all the things that I really enjoy doing that are not related to being on a screen, or drawing anything, or being creative in the way that I would use my creative brain for animation. Because when I'm stressed out, it's usually because I'm trying to do too much at once. So it's just like, okay, let the creative brain rest, and just focus on one thing at a time and make sure you're getting fresh air, moving around, and stuff like that. And sometimes just yelling at somebody about like all of the problems that you have works too.
My last question is from Gary Plomo. If you're
Mhm.
comfortable speaking about it with all your studio experience, I was wondering how financially satisfying it has been for you working in studio. Has it been enough for you to live the life that you do, or do you find that you need to look about setting up and other streams of income as well, to make it all work?
That's a really, really good question. I'm glad
Yeah,
we,
it
we were
is.
able to talk about that.
Yeah, in fact, good
Um,
one to end. Good note to end on as well. To
Yeah, for
say.
sure. So, for me personally, it was very difficult when I started,
Mhm.
because I was very inexperienced, and so it reflected my paycheck at the time because I was being paid on a frame rate. It has changed now. I am at a salary rate now, but it also is changing. Like as I was getting better, I was able to do more frames and get paid more. So in animation, at least in Canada, there's always the big debate. Is it better to be paid by frames? Is it better to be paid a salary rate? And I think across the board, pretty much everybody agrees that salary is better. Like the only pro being paid at a frame rate, which, sorry, I should explain that. That means like for every frame of animation you hand in, you get paid a certain amount of money for. So if you do less frames, you get less money. And if you do more frames, you get more money. So the pro was like, well, yeah, if you're a really fast animator, you can make a ton of money. And that's like great in theory, but most people don't do that because the expectation is already set, um, in such a way like what the directors and stuff think the average is already going to be. So if like,
Yeah.
you're an average person, to be like, I'm gonna do above average frames. It's like, probably not. Maybe just average, and average ends up being like whatever. So,
Right.
but that's sort of, I think, a bigger topic. So I won't get into super, super,
Yeah.
super details. For me, though, for my
And
salary, not just
isn't
as a, oh, sorry,
sorry, I was
yeah,
saying, isn't it somewhat unfair if, for example, because I'm assuming that you guys animate by sequence or by scene,
yeah,
and wouldn't it be unfair if, for example, someone gets a scene where Hilda has to pick up a cup off the cupboard versus someone else has to do a scene where Hilda has to fight a giant, and fighting
yeah,
that giant
exactly,
might be a little bit more skill involved and labor intensive than
yes.
just picking up a cup. But it's like the same amount of frames, but the guy who got the cup finished in 1 week, and you're still on the fight scene a week
Yes,
later.
exactly,
You
exactly.
know?
So just to touch on that too, like it would be handed out in such a way that you try to keep things balanced, and you try to give the harder stuff to the people with more experience and the easier stuff to the people that are fresh out of school. But like, the system itself is kind of like it's tough to do it that way. So um that being said, though, even when I was on frame rate, once I got more experience, I was making enough money to live the lifestyle that I had, but it was very like, I was just supporting myself. So I didn't have a partner or like kids or anything to take care of. So I was okay, but that was okay because that was what my lifestyle was. And so now, being in a salary position, I've changed things in my life. And so now I am able to live the life that I want to comfortably with just the one stream of income and be able to support everyone that I need to support. Now, that being said, this is a bit of a side note. The way that the world is these days, I think people need to have multiple streams of income anyway, but multiple streams of income where the other streams are more passive so that you're not working necessarily two jobs. That's not to say that I don't think anybody should work two jobs. I know that's the reality for a lot of people. So not to take away from that at all, but when I say multiple streams of income, I mean more in the sense of like being knowledgeable about money. That's not something that a lot of animators know about or people in the animation industry know about. Paying
Mhm.
taxes and things like that and being on top of their money. It's really important for everybody to have good financial literacy and be able to put money away in savings, put it away in investments, find ways to make it grow without doing more work. And again, that's coming from somebody and that's in Canada right now. I don't know what the situation is like in Jamaica for resources for doing things like that, but if there are other ways of doing it, like um, selling your skills online in the form of doing commissions or doing freelance work, um, or mentoring or anything like that. I think it's important for
Yeah.
people to have multiple streams of income, but it's not necessary everywhere. Depends on where you work, depends on what rate you're being paid. But if you want to be working in the animation industry and you're afraid you're going to be starving, probably not. So there's that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Melissa. That was a very, very wonderful note to end on. And
Thank you.
we will definitely keep in contact. And if you're ever in Jamaica, hit me up. I'll treat
Mhm.
you some jerk chicken and ackee and saltfish and
The real
whatever
thing.
else. So
Yes,
yeah, man.
absolutely. Thank you guys so much. It's a joy to be here today. Um, and I wish you guys all the best in your future endeavors with animation and stuff. I would love to see animation too if you want to share that with me as well. And when my shows come out, when Hilda comes out, and when the new one comes out, I will definitely let you guys know so you can catch those too.
Yeah, man. I will definitely take a screenshot and put a Jamaican flag beside it and post it on Facebook. Okay, well, you take care. Thank you again. Have an excellent weekend. I see everybody in the chat saying thank you, thank you. Awesome, really good conversation. So you're definitely very appreciated. Thank you again for taking your
Thank you
time.
all so much. I know this was for you guys, but this was also equally for me too. Happy to share the knowledge and just encourage everybody. And yeah,
All right. All right. Well, bye, everybody. I
bye
am off
everyone.
now. As you can hear, the master is calling.
Hope to see you all again sometime.
Yep. Thank you.